intro music, yeah! Woohoo! Fancy intro music, yeah! Woohoo!
Welcome back, Starjet Fleekin' Man fans. Sorry about the miss there yesterday on the stream. Comcast problems, but when it's the only ISP, you deal with what you got to deal with. But today, I want to cover a couple things. Number one, I'm going to do something real quick for those of you who are, players asking about the Monaveen / Gilded Pickle. And then I also want to cover something that I keep getting asked a lot. And one thing that I think a lot of players forget is that this game loves new players, new users, and constantly launching new servers. I was actually discussing and talking to a new player on server 700, which is one of the newer US servers. So we're going to talk about a topic that gets discussed a lot, which is fighting gold hostile bosses. Now, before we get started, as you can see, I'm going to be putting my pickle, my Monaveen, out into its designated area so that it can start its grind. And if you will notice, finally, baby steps in the right direction. We can now see the cost of the Monaveen. Just don't try to redeem it because, well, it's broken. So 10 chests is going to cost you 45,000, and then, okay, normal Scopely math, 18 is going to be double the cost at 90,000. Now, in terms of how much that's going to get you, well, that's actually pretty good. Now, keep in mind, you got to remember that for whatever reason, they decided to make the Monaveen have 200 blueprints. I don't know why. But if you were to max pull the second option over there, that means you're going to get the Monaveen in 11.1 weeks. So 12 weeks. So that's around a 3-month time span, not including if you could get some from the event store. Now, before anybody says anything, before anybody gets mad and like comments in the comment section down below, 100% I agree with you. The fact that this is locked behind only 3 territories and that's it, precluding not even a majority, like a vast majority of the player base from unlocking this if they hadn't bought it, I think is ridiculous. And we will continue to pass on that feedback. However, it is my job to simply let you know the sourcing. And in terms of individual sourcing, were this available to literally everybody, it's actually quite nice. I mean, truly, it's not an expensive cost and gives you a decent amount. So at the time of making this video, I had to do an edit here because apparently some people are noticing the Monaveen redeem working depends on how many times you click it. So if it's worked for you, awesome. If it's not, don't worry. We have passed along that feedback to the dev team. Now for you new players, because I wanted to make a video specifically for you, well, let's talk about attacking these gold hostile bosses. Now, if you don't know or maybe unaware, there are different styles of combat in the game, depending on what you're fighting. Reds, for example, like this Texas class hostile, we zoom out, a little red triangle, that is a hostile. Purples are your alliance mates, so those are players. Blues are players that aren't in your alliance, like this one up here. And then golds are going to be hostiles that are spawned via missions. Hence us calling them gold hostile bosses. One mission you're going to see is any of the combat trainings that max out. So the combat training bosses are going to be one of those gold hostiles, or you might find with another mission where you have to approach or destroy or attack something, which is going to be part of what we're discussing here, like defeat the Starfleet spy over here in the Singularity, which, hey, why don't I actually go ahead and send something there since I'm not doing anything with that ship. We're going to send it out the direction. But real quick, that's a bad officer set to send. We'll cover that in a second. Let's go over officers. So with there being 200 plus officers in the game now, it can be a bit confusing to know what to use. And you'll hear players like me talking to veterans and veterans saying, hey, Pipe and Road Chin, classic. Everybody wants to run Pipe and Road Chin. If you're in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, it's probably your primary hostile grinding crew, but there are also other crews that are very effective. So if I sort by group real quick, you will see Pike, Moreau, and then come down here to Chin. So if you're fighting an explorer or trader or a battleship, you're usually going to use this. So let's pop this up real quick and notice if the opponent is a hostile, very specific. So the key here is any attack that is, or any officer that lists specifically the target probably isn't going to work if it gets a gold hostile boss. So if it says hostile, if it says player, if it says armada, not going to work. So Chin here would be ineffective against a gold hostile boss, but they're not the only one. We could also take a look at the most popular and probably the most effective hostile grinding officer in the game, Q, Borg officer that is sourced for level 40 plus players, but every now and then events like event stores and random events will come around, allowing other players to source this character. You see, Resist and Retaliate is the below deck ability. Q has a 50% chance to increase critical hit chance by 25% for 2 rounds after being hit by a hostile. So again, not going to work against these gold hostile bosses. Now, there are also newer hostile grinding crews. We've talked about some of the value. If you are a player in the low 30s, you've unlocked the Mantis. Well, the Mantis gives you the ability to start sourcing what is one of the best crews in the game, the most well-sourced crews in the game, the Strange New World crew, which you'll see right here with Strange New World Pike, Strange New World Spock, Ortegas, Uhura, and of course, Hemmer. So with those, you would say, hey, would I use these in combat? And the shield mitigation, maybe, but if you're going to go into the battle with anything like that, you're going to want to have full effectiveness. So if I was to click over to Hemmer, I notice that he says, hostile. So in the way that it's worded, it feels a little, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because it says hostile survey ships. Well, the way that you word it here, instead of it being capitalized hostile like it's a pronoun, it just says basically something that's a baddie, but that only works against reds. So let's talk about what does work, okay? So anything that is generically listed in a combat ability probably is going to work. And let's go over some basic crews that we know will work and give you some of those as an example. So this is 5 Kang Khan. Now this is a very old classic crew, and I know many of you are gonna go, well, Rev, these are all epics. I don't have them yet. Don't worry, we'll cover a couple different sets. But this is one that I would use pretty heavily, especially if the gold hostile boss I was fighting was an interceptor. Why? Well, Kang is giving me a boost to accuracy. Accuracy is the natural counter to dodge, which is going to lower that opponent mitigation. And as you can see here, it just says at the start of the battle, Kang increases the accuracy of the ship by X%. This is a tier 4 Kang, so it's 800%. If it was a tier 5, it would be 1600. If it was a little bit lower tier, maybe it's 200. But the key is it works against gold hostile bosses and helps improve mitigation, which in terms of combat in this game, we're always trying to move mitigation in our favor. We want to have high mitigation. We want the opponent to have low mitigation. We talk about this in our Discord all the time. Now, if you notice over here, we've got this ability, which we're not really worried about, but it does work. And then you've got the Captain's ability, which is increasing your mitigation. So you're boosting your piercing to lower the enemy's mitigation, and now you're boosting your own mitigation. So that works. And then you've got Khan, which every time they hit a ship is hit by a ship or defense platform. It's very generic here. See, it just says ship. It doesn't say what it's for. It gives you a critical hit chance boost every time. So works against gold hostile bosses. Now let's talk about other crews. So let's hit this little button on sign offices and take a look at some of the ones I have down here to give you an idea of what can work, including talking about things that aren't just epic officers. Because I know as a new player, that's going to be hard to source. So some of the earliest things that you can source is if you're doing the method that I always talk about, faction grinding, especially as an early level player, you should be able to unlock these officers. You've got Spock, you've got Kirk, and you can even go really crazy and throw in Bones there, but we typically don't do this unless we've actually tiered them up and leveled them up. But either way, you could still do like I'm doing, which is, not have that prep before the video and then complete it and do it like this. And this is going to do a couple things for you. Number one, you have Spock's shield regeneration ability, which as you can see, is not reliant on it being a hostile armada or whatever, simply to keep your shields up. Why is this important? Because shields stop 80% of any non-mitigated damage. Doesn't matter if you're a level 10 player or a level 40 player. If you keep your shields up, it can be helpful. Now, this is very effective for low players, completely ineffective once you get into the 4-star ship range as a later player, but early on, very useful, especially for these gold hostile bosses. You can also combine this with other things. We always talk about this as an early run too. Khan is an officer that is sourced pretty easily in the 20s, specifically starting at level 28. Every Sunday you can source Khan, plus how you can source them through ultras and the augment chest. So this is another one that you can run. But you also want to try to be specific to the hostile you're fighting. One thing that I like to do if it's an explorer gold hostile is to go Yuki, Marcus, and then Khan. And that way I'm getting the shield strip from Yuki, which is going to actually give me 15% with synergy. Ignore the 10s because I haven't hit the confirm button. a 15% flat shield strip, which is super useful against these gold hostile bosses. And then you're also going to get the bonus of the piercing boost with Marcus, similar to what we were just talking about with Kang. And then of course we can throw Khan at the very end. The big key here is to take a look at the different officer abilities and really focus on those that are neutral as possible. And it can be very difficult because we've reached a state in the game where there's so many officers, it's tough to know who is who and where's where. But you can kind of take a look at some of the big ones, like 6 of 11, who I talk about being so amazing, as you can see here, when attacking an Armada target. There are a handful, just about one officer that specifically is talking about fighting the special hostiles, but for the most part, not really used highly or effectively across the game. Most people are going to use something like this. The real key is to kind of know your main hostile crews don't work, right? It's the Pipe Chins, the Strange New Worlds, and even going into the new Voyager crews, which even though I love the Voyager crews and a lot of people are really happy with them, they're not going to be terribly effective. Now we have made it into this system here. You see I've got my gold hostile boss as a Federation scout, and I'm going to pretty easily win just because I'm in a larger pylon. But if you take a look in terms of effectiveness, are we going to be, getting a lot of criticals? Are we going to be dominating in that way? Truth is, we're not. And if I go into this battle log, that's what you're going to see. So I beat the Federation scout. I took way more damage than I would against a normal hostile, as you can see here. Normally, if you're fighting a hostile with Pipe Chin, Janeway crew, Strange New Worlds, you won't take near that amount of damage. If you check into the battle log, you're going to see, well, looky there, no officer ability. So the only thing that worked in this case was pure power, big pylum, versus pure power, that Enterprise Federation scout over there. And even though I love Janeway, again, you see when taking hull damage from a non-player hostile or Armada. Again, it's specific. So you run into this where even though there's so many officers in the game, you got to know what works where and how it works. And hopefully this is kind of giving you that baseline of how to do that. Gold hostile bosses are very unique in that you're going to need to use generic crews. And we're coming into a point in the game where there's so many officers, it's hard to know what's generic because everything feels specific and it can be kind of annoying. But there's a couple of basic crews. In fact, I think I give you 3 here, but a good premise of what to use. Marcus, Sharvanik, and Kang are all huge because they're going to boost your piercing and lower your opponent's mitigation depending on the type of ship that you're fighting. With that being an explorer, I would have used Marcus there, and that's powerful. Yuki can be effective against all of them, but Yuki particularly really great getting the 15% shield strip, but you could use Yuki against all of them. You could use 5 of 11 for the mitigation. Khan, useful against all, and those are going to kind of be the keys. And the good news is most of those can be sourced very early in the game. So if you enjoyed this video, and I hope it really did help, all you got to do is like it and comment down if you have other questions. That's it. Live long and plunder. Stay safe for the Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch the next one. And I'm out.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.